And I think the Minister might take it with the later question as well. It's just a few down. And I know, Minister, that you responded on the first question there, I think, to Deputy Rabbit earlier, but I know in 2015 there were 720 18 to 22-year-olds receiving an aftercare service, and 78% of those were in the 18 to 20 years age bracket. And of course the requirement for an aftercare plan to be in place prior to leaving residential care is very important, but are you concerned about the deficiencies that exist, and can you tell us what follow-up is there for people who seem to disengage and slip through the net? And I note that between 2014 and 2017, the number of homeless people in the 18 to 24 age group rose from 436 to 783. 549 of these young adults were based in Dublin, and in obviously very vulnerable children and young people. And what additional resources are you putting forward, Minister? Thanks.
Questions, Deputy. Every year between 450 and 500 young people leave the care of the state. Aftercare is the planning and support put in place to meet the needs of a young person leaving statutory care at 18 years of age, to assist them to make that transition to independent living. There has been widespread uptake of aftercare services by those leaving care. In 2016, there were a total of 1,806 persons aged 18 to 22 in receipt of aftercare supports from TUSLA at the end of the fourth quarter. In 2015, this figure was 1,763, and in 2014, 1,685 young adults, including those aged 23 and over, were in receipt of aftercare supports. Of the 605 young adults discharged from care on reaching 18 years of age during 2016, 581, or 96%, were eligible for aftercare supports. Of these, 521, or 90%, availed of the supports. Engagement with TUSLA in relation to aftercare is purely on a voluntary basis. TUSLA has no power to oblige a young person to avail of the support required. TUSLA, furthermore, does not operate a policy of discharging young adults into homeless services. Of those in receipt of aftercare supports at the end of 2016, 9% were identified as being in other accommodation, and that includes accommodations such as psychiatric services, disability services, mother and baby centres, or even prison. The number of young adults in these services declined significantly in 2014 to 2015, in the 2014 to 2015 period, with a small increase in 2016. TUSLA are in the process of updating an aftercare national audit, which will provide a more detailed picture of the outcomes for those leaving care in Ireland, including those identified as having complex needs which leave them at a heightened risk of homelessness.
I very much welcome the last information you gave us there, that TUSLA carrying out a national audit. Do you think it's time, though, that aftercare was placed on a much firmer, perhaps statutory basis? Because given that I think since TUSLA's own report showed that since 2010 almost 150 vulnerable young adults who were known to the service have died. Very sobering reading, I mean, to realise the disconnect between, I think, the HSE and the TUSLA and the actual fate of those individuals. 11% of the 149, I think, were in care. Another 11% were under 21 years, had been in care until 18 years, or were receiving aftercare services. So it's a statistic, I think, that is fairly shocking. Minister, if you look obviously at some of the kind of facilities that are available, for example, I looked at the case management guidebook in the youth services aftercare, the youth service emergency accommodation and youth services transitional houses. The number of places available in many units is so small. Leafroy House, for example, has just 7 places. Cade Came, an excellent housing project for 18 to 21-year-olds, only has 14 places. Crosscare, aftercare service for males, only between 16 and 21, only has 7 places. So, and in particular, young adults with babies who are still in care and young children. Are there any aftercare housing placements for them, for example? Have they got a priority with local authorities? Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Deputy. By way of offering some answer to many of the key issues that you've just identified there, you may be aware that in addition to the aftercare planning and supports provided by TUSLA in the Rebuilding Ireland Action Plan for Housing and Homelessness, it commits to ensuring that young people leaving state care who are at risk of homelessness are identified and catered for through appropriate housing and other supports. Funding is now in place under the Capital Assistance Scheme, enabling approved housing bodies to acquire residential units to accommodate young people exiting state care, something that was recommended to me by Peter McVerry when we were looking at preparing for this plan, and eventually got it into the plan, and now working with his CEO, Pat Doyle, and others in relation to collaborating on developing, both with TUSLA and others, the development of principles and criteria related to funding proposals for that kind of housing. And where accommodation is provided under CAS, TUSLA will provide additional independent living supports, in particular for the most vulnerable care leavers, some of whom you've mentioned, in accordance with the individual's pre-agreed aftercare plan.
And just to ask you about a PQ that you gave me, I think, a while ago, which was on 2nd of May, number 1438, in relation to children in foster care. The figures didn't seem to quite add up. There was a missing 132 children as we added the figure, so you might get your officials to check that. And just to ask you finally, briefly, about separated children seeking asylum and state care who have completed their Leaving Cert but are unable to apply for a SUSI grant due to not having full legal status, because in order to qualify for SUSI, as you know, it's necessary to have legal status and satisfy the requirements for habitual residency. But surely, as part of an aftercare plan, Minister, our social workers and the Department of Justice and Equality should prioritise securing legal status for these young adults. Some figures, I think, again, that I received show that there were 9 young adults who had turned 18, sat the Leaving Cert, and were receiving aftercare support. So, again, surely this is something that we could address urgently, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy. I have met some of those young people. So, of course, I appreciate and understand what you're asking for, and my own personal commitment to, I think that would be, so important to be able to deliver. And I do appreciate, and I hear, you placing that too within the context of that particular cohort, group of young people, within the context of aftercare. And so, in light of that, what I would say is that I will reflect on that and engage with, I suppose, other ministers, education, justice, equality, in terms of that particular group of young people who I would like to see be able to avail of educational opportunities in the same way that you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Next is